got my Twitter, got my Evernote, got my adult beverage. So yeah, let's go. Hey everybody, this is Derek, and I am a Dildo-smith. I am the creator of Amavidi, and I make dildos every day. I'm here to do the weekly AMA, Ask Me Anything. This is Ask a Dildo-smith, where I answer your questions about all things relating to dildos, lubes, dildo making, or anything else that might come up. So, yeah. All right. Gonna be pretty loose and conversational this evening. So we'll have a chance to answer a lot of questions and things like that. Let me turn my phone on Do Not Disturb so we don't get any interruptions. All right, so I think tonight I'm going to start off with some of the technical issues that we've had over the last couple of weeks. I have done a lot of testing and a lot of research, and what I am finding is that between encoding the stream, encoding a recording of that stream, and encoding a video over Skype or Zoom or anything else, between those three things, we're basically overwhelming my video card. And for some reason, I'm not entirely sure about, somewhere at around 45 minutes or so, we end up with basically the driver crashes and the video card goes wonky. And so the encoding stream gets pretty choppy. So George has let me loose with the credit card. So I'm on the hunt for any video cards that I can find. Not that the video card I have is that old. It's probably, maybe last generation. But we're doing so much on that video card that it's really kind of overwhelming it. So that's where we are with that. I am looking at kind of adjust something here. Adjusting the format in the interim so that maybe we can figure out a way to still have guests on, and maybe it's that we don't do video for the guest, or there's several different options there, but we're hoping to be able to keep those guests on and make sure that we give them the platform that they really deserve. So I did have a question about whether or not we would have Linda from Paladin back on, and the answer to that is yes. Definitely will have her back on so that we can actually get through the conversation that we originally tried to have. So that's definitely in the works. The other one is the butters. We're working on getting that scheduled. There's one other one. I think we have a commitment, but I don't know if we have it scheduled exactly yet. But we should have Pleasure Forge on as well. So, yeah, I think we've got the next 4 to 6 weeks kind of booked out, and that should be good information and conversation over the next few weeks. So let's see, topics for this evening. Like I said earlier on, it's kind of going to be a really loose and conversational kind of session. My initial topic was viscosity, and that may be a little bit technical for some folks, but it's interesting to me how viscosity affects the end result, and that really means that it's interesting for me to talk about. So I think we'll start there and then open it up to any questions or anything else that anyone might have. So I think what I'm going to start off with is kind of a discussion of what viscosity is. Viscosity is how thick something is and what its flow resistance is and the manner in which it flows. If you think about water versus honey, honey has a very thick viscosity. Water flows very easily. Or if you think about the difference between warm honey and cold honey, they have very different viscosities as well. And what that means is that they flow very differently, and they, the way that they enter the mold is very different as well. So, viscosity does have an impact, but I think it's overlooked quite a bit by folks who are making toys and pouring silicone. Let's see. I don't know how much I want to go into kind of the structure of viscosity and what it means, but we'll start there. And I got a couple of visual aids here. I'm going to see if I can get the system to work correctly. I just realized that I don't have audio on my my website view. On my web view, yeah, there's no audio there. So let's see if I can Yeah, let's see if we can fix that. Audio input, mic, mic. Maybe let's try this. I think we've got sound again. Yeah. All right. So to recap, that's going to be a part that we edit out. This is kind of our standard viscosity. This is what we are working with 90% of the time, in that we have this kind of this thin viscosity, and we really get these feathered thin kind of layers. And we get a little bit here where we can see some folding and things like that. But, you know, what we're seeing are these really thin layers that kind of, they don't really fold on each other as much as they just kind of layer on top of each other. So yeah, that's kind of the standard viscosity that we use. And this is probably, you know, kind of a thick oil viscosity. It's not quite, it's not as thin as water. It doesn't flow as easily as water, but it's not as thick as honey or something like that. So, you know, this thin feathering that happens right up here and kind of down through here, that's the silicone really creating these very thin layers as it pours. Now, if we go to something like this, where we have a little bit thicker viscosity, this is, we can start to see some of these layers and some of the folding happening, where the silicone, as it pours, it folds on itself a little bit. And we're starting to get some of this chunkiness in terms of, you know, this part right in here, especially the silicone, as it folds on itself, it kind of creates these larger pieces, and that's from the viscosity of the silicone. And as it's thicker, it tends to want to stick together more and kind of fold on itself, as opposed to just kind of pour on itself. Now this one, we are looking at, it's a little bit thicker. It's probably, this is probably about the viscosity of honey. And we're starting to see this really nice ribboning and this folding that happens, especially like right in here, this area. We're really seeing that the way that, you know, as that silicone pours and it sticks to itself, creates this very thick stream. It kind of folds and sits upon itself. And because of that, we start seeing this ribboning that happens. And, you know, let's see if I got a close up, a little bit different view of it. This one, as it kind of comes down here, we're starting to see some layering and some chunkiness that's pretty nice. So, you know, this has a very different look than this or this. And, you know, I kind of prefer that chunkiness and really showing off the difference in the colors and the way that those colors interact. Here's a little bit of a kind of a zoom in on that. And, well, I hope you'll forgive me. These are all just kind of examples, and so there's a lot of dust on them. And there's actually a little bit of a micro bubble right there. You might see it. See if can I zoom in on that a little bit? Yeah, right there. See that little micro bubble. But then we go into something like this that has a a lot of viscosity to it. We're probably kind of at cold honey viscosity at this point. And we're starting to see a lot more layering and folding, and you can really see the way that, some of these layers, the way that they just kind of fold in on each other, and that contrast. And again, when we talk about viscosity and we look at something like this, we're seeing a certain amount of blending that happens up in here, where that viscosity, as it approaches kind of the thinner viscosities, the colors start to blend a little bit. And so this feathering and this blending that happens is very different from, say, this kind of chunkiness that happens as we get to thicker viscosities. So yeah, that was kind of my little dissertation on the way that viscosity affects pores and the way that colors come through on each toy. So all of that is kind of a little bit of a almost a segue a little bit into we've been experimenting with different viscosities and different ways that we can create kind of these layers, and the way that we can play with color and contrast. And so we've been experimenting with that, and ultimately it's probably a 50-50 chance at this point that we're going to end up changing the way that we approach our viscosity and the way that we approach some of those colors and the way that we can create those ribbons and things like that. So if you have any questions or thoughts or opinions about how some of those pictures looked, let me know. And we'll be able to answer any of those. Let me see. There are a couple of things I wanted to apply here, but I don't think I can while we're talking. So, were there any thoughts or comments or any questions that anybody might have? There was a question about density versus viscosity, and ultimately those are two different things. Viscosity talks about how something flows, as opposed to density or firmness, which talks about how firm or how resistant to bending a silicone is after it's cured. So we're talking, when you're talking about viscosity versus density, you're talking about pre-pour versus post-cured. And so they're very different things. I will say that there is a certain amount of correlation between the two. As you get into some of the higher viscosities, you tend to see firmer silicone out of them. We're experimenting with a couple of different additives that change the viscosity as well as the firmness. And I've got two different deadeners at this point. A deadener is something that reduces the firmness. So you can start at an A25 and reduce the firmness down to, say, a 0050 or even a 0030. And I'm working with two different ones right now. And what I'm finding is that one of them has a higher viscosity than the other. And so that has an impact on the final look of the toy in once it's finally cured, etc. So yeah, we're the hardener that we use, because we'll start with a certain firmness and sometimes we'll harden it up to say an A40 or something like that. The hardener actually is very viscous and will really change the viscosity. So, when we start talking about, density or firmness versus the viscosity, there is a certain amount of correlation, but it has less to do with the viscosity. I'm sorry, let me rephrase. The final firmness has less to do with viscosity than the chemicals would ultimately end up at. I don't know if I said that very well, but let's see. Follow-up questions. There was a question about temperature versus viscosity. And yes, temperature does affect viscosity, kind of like honey. Warm honey versus cold honey. You put honey in the fridge and try to pour it, and it just doesn't pour at all. But then you warm it up in the microwave, and you can just pour it out very easily. So yeah, there is an effect on the viscosity when you change temperature. We generally try to avoid big temperature changes within the studio when we're doing pours. So kind of work in it's a little bit of a warehouse, but it's more of it's kind of like a nice studio. I don't know, I like it. But when I go in the morning, it might be 60 degrees in there. And if I tried to pour something when I first get in, probably going to have some problems because the viscosity is going to be so thick. And then once the studio warms up, get up to 70, 72 degrees, things flow just like we expect them to. Now, one of the things that temperature does affect is cure time and pot life. Pot life is the time between when you combine the two parts of the silicone to the point where you can't pour it anymore. So it's the time that you have between mixing and you can't pour it anymore. Generally speaking, we're looking at about 5 to 7 minutes with the silicone that I use. So, one of the things that temperature does affect is pot life and cure time. The higher the temperature is, the faster it will cure and the shorter the pot life. So, temperature does have an effect. And it has an effect in multiple areas. It does affect viscosity, and it does affect cure time. So yeah, temperature is something that we really try to control very tightly. Is there a viscosity that is better for different pour patterns? Yeah. If you're looking for a really feathery, light, what's the word I want to use here? If you're looking for a very feathery, light blending between colors, you'll want to go with a very thin viscosity. If you're looking for something that's really chunky and where you get real strong definition between your colors, you're going to be looking for something that is very viscous, very thick. So yeah, there is a viscosity that works nicely for each. I'm getting lost here a little bit. There is a viscosity that works well for each of the different the styles that you want to end up with. So, question of how many different densities do you offer for each model? We have 5 different densities, firmnesses that we use. Anything from a 0030 up to an A40. A 0030 is very floppy, very soft. An A40 is really very firm. So we have about 5 different viscosities. I'm sorry. We have about 5 different firmnesses that we use, from a 0030, 0050, an A10, A25, and an A40. So we really try to find the right firmness for each toy. Something like a parabolica or a gibelus or a thicker toy, you're probably going to want to skew, and we do try to skew just slightly softer. So while our medium might be an A10, we would probably recommend, say, a 0050 for a thicker, heavier toy. And if you go for something that has a very thick girth to it, a very thick diameter to it, then you'll probably want to go even softer than that. Something like a 0030, possibly even a 0020, depending on just how soft you want that. Because some of those thicker toys, you want a little bit more give to them, so that they make it just a little bit easier to play with. So, let's see. I think one of the things I want to mention while I wait for any more questions that anybody might have. One of the things that just released this weekend, and I haven't really announced, is on our website, amavidi.com, we're starting to do custom made to order pours. So, you can pick any of the different models that we have, whether it's a Metropole or a Gibelus or a Parabolica, any of the different models that we have, we're going to start offering them in the colors that you choose. We've got about 38 different colors at this point, and you can choose up to 3 different colors. So if you have always wanted a Parabolica in, Fort Knox plus Empress with a little bit of little black dress in between there, we can do that for you. Now there's some really pretty colors in here. The golds are really nice. We've got some really nice reds. The Nightshade is one of my favorites. But one of the things, these fluorescents, these color swatches don't do them any justice. These are pretty bright fluorescents. So you'll definitely want to take a look at those. In addition to choosing the model and the different colors, we also have 4 different pour styles that we're doing, where you can do what we're calling a chaos pour, where each of the colors are going to show up throughout the entire length of the toy. And you're actually going to see feathering of the colors at the top all the way down to the bottom. And down in through the middle here, we start to get to see some of that really nice layering that happens, some of that really nice ribboning. We're also doing stripes. So if you wanted to do something in a particular color pattern, one of the things that we have done a couple where I think the cotton candy is the same colors of the pansexual flag, and the dewy skies are the colors of the trans flag. So those are a couple of the LGBT flags that we have done. But if there was one that you wanted, let's say a poly flag, where you wanted blue on one side, black in the middle, and then red in the on the other side, we could definitely do that for you. The marbled is one that you start to see this. It's a little bit more where the colors have a little bit more definition. So we have red at the top, white at the bottom, and this black that kind of helps this transition between the two colors. So that's really interesting to me. The layered is kind of, these are really hard layers between, I say really hard layers, they're really hard transitions. So if you wanted something that had a, 3 different colors, but you wanted these hard transitions between each one, we can definitely do that for you. So yeah, that's one of the things that we have been working on recently. I think one of the things I'm going to do this week, because I really need to test this system. I really need to figure out a way to kind of see how the orders come in and test the process. So I think one of the things I'm going to do this month is, if you join the Patreon this month, we're going to do the custom pours for each of the patrons. So I think the basic Patreon, if you want a toy each month, is $40. So if you really wanted to experiment with this, and cost might be an issue for you, for $40, and that includes shipping, join the Patreon at the Flourish level, and you can do a custom pour and give that system a test. So that is something that we're going to be doing this month. Let's see. Go back to the questions here. Let's see. This was from Drew. What can a new maker with all the tools, supplies, etc. hope to make each month if they've got a good looking design? Worst case, best case scenario. That's a really hard question to answer. What I can tell you is that let's see. I don't really know how to approach that question. If you have a really good design, you can do fairly well. The problem with answering that question is that it ignores time, and it ignores how long you've been offering your products to the market. The volume of transactions that I do is completely different from, say, Pleasure Forge, Uberime, Godemichi, any of the folks that have been around for several years. I think I saw recently that it was either Monster Smash Toys, or Xenocat. I think it was Monster Smash. They talked about the drops that they had done over the last few years. When they first started, they would do 25 to 50 pieces in each drop and probably sell through most of them fairly quickly. And their most recent drop, they did 250 toys. So The difference between those two scenarios is how did they approach the market? How did they market their pieces? How did they develop their relationship with the community? Things like that. So I guess maybe to answer your worst case, best case scenario question is to say that, if you have a good design, you could probably look at selling 25 to 50 in your first drop. And then give it 2 or 3 years, you might be doing 250 pieces per drop. You want to do the math on that, average it out to say $60 a piece. You do 25 pieces, you're looking at $1,500. And then when you're looking at 250 pieces, you might be looking at, say, what's the math there? About $10,000. So, there's, it really, the best case and worst case scenarios really depend on your situation. So hopefully that kind of answered that question, even if it was a little bit meandering. I think we finally got around to the actual substance of the question. George is doing a wonderful job of keeping up with me and dropping links into the chat for everyone. The Patreon is at patreon.com/Amavidi. That's AMAVIDI. The website is amavidi.com, AMAVIDI.com, and drop into the shop and look at, if you start here at the website, over here, you'll click on shop. And then the first item actually is custom pours. You can click on that and drop straight into the new item there. Follow-up question. Silicone, is that a chunky cost? Do starter makers typically run pre-orders? I think the best way to describe it is spiky. I think that the best way to think about it is that you're going to invest a certain amount of money into the materials, and then you're going to hopefully recover your expenses once you get through the drop and get your sales done. I think that's probably the best way to approach it. You can do something like a Kickstarter where you release your designs and tell people about them and build up a certain amount of demand that way. Personally, I don't like it. There's a philosophy that goes along with Kickstarter that is not the way that I like to approach it, but that's for each individual to decide on. But is it a chunky cost? Yeah. I'm going to spend $500 to $1,000 on a batch of silicone, and I'm going to I'll probably see, if I spend $1,000 on silicone, I'll probably see somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 in sales, depending on a lot of different things. But you're going to be looking at about a 5 to 1 or 10 to 1 ratio between what you spend on materials and what you ultimately get in your sales. Initial materials and prototypes require an investment. Yeah. There's a lot of expense involved in those initial materials, prototypes, equipment. You're probably going to be looking at, if you do it on the cheap and really hunt for deals, you could probably get into it for about $500. You should probably budget $1,000 or so to get into all the equipment and the initial investment in materials and prototypes and things like that. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question. In a future episode, Derek will show off his shelf of shame. Yeah, I actually have a bucket of shame. It's it's about half full at this point. There's probably 100 pieces in there that, for whatever reason, didn't end up getting sold. This is actually one that would end up being in my shelf of shame or bucket of shame. The major issues with this one, I don't even know if I can show this properly, but right there you might see a tiny bubble. I think there's also one on the back side of the head. That is one of the things about the thicker viscosities, is that they can trap bubbles very easily. So you're often running and riding that knife's edge between thick enough to get what you want versus too thick and causing yourself problems. So, any other topics, thoughts, questions, or anything else? While I'm waiting for that, I'm going to jump over to Patreon real quick and just kind of show off. Let's see, why does it do that to me? I want to see the public page. That's what I want to see. So if you're on the Patreon, the Flourish patron, which is $40 a month, that'll get you a new toy every month. Although if you are outside the United States, there is an international version. So for $60 a month, you can do it internationally. The $40 will get you the monthly toy. And like I said, this month we're going to do a custom pour for all of the patrons. Let's see. I think that is about it. Were there any other questions, George? Did you have anything else for me? All right. So it was kind of a little bit of a conversational topic this evening. So yeah, we'll look at bringing in guests in the coming weeks, and we'll hopefully have, I can guarantee you that Paladin will be back within the next 2 weeks, and hopefully we'll have the Butters and Pleasure Forge coming in over the next month or so. So I wanted to say thank you for joining me this evening, and we will do this again next week. Thanks, everybody. Bye. what I'm going to start off with is kind of discussion of what viscosity is. Viscosity is how thick something is and what its